Sometimes life puts people in situations they never imagined they would experience. This is the story of Eduardo Santos, a 38-year-old man who had a fortune of almost 8 billion reais built through his technology company, Santos Digital. But on that Tuesday in October, he wasn't the CEO feared by his competitors or the man who appeared on the covers of business magazines. He was just someone trying to find something that money couldn't buy. Real people. Loneliness had become Eduardo's most faithful companion in recent years, surrounded by sycophants, advisors who agreed with everything he said, and people interested only in his bank account. He had completely lost touch with reality.
Just a special, please.
That's why he created this strange ritual that he practiced every 3 months, disguising himself as an ordinary person and going out into the world to discover who people really were when they didn't know who he was. That afternoon, Eduardo chose Sabor Paulista, one of the most refined restaurants in his chain of fine dining establishments. He wore a faded Palmeiras t-shirt, worn-out jeans he'd bought at a thrift store in the East Zone, old sneakers, and a worn-out cap. In the mirror of a gas station bathroom, he saw reflected a man who could easily have been mistaken for a delivery man or a construction worker at the end of his shift. The restaurant was bustling with business lunch activity. Men in suits discussed million-dollar deals while sampling dishes that cost more than many families' monthly salaries. As he approached the receptionist, a blonde with a fake smile, Eduardo immediately noticed the contempt in her eyes.
What can I get for you today?
Just the special, please.
She asked in that tone that made it clear he was in the wrong place. I'd like a table for lunch, he replied, trying to soften his accent of someone who'd studied at the best
I'll just do the steak.
She hesitated, looking around as if searching for a way out of the awkward situation. You have a reservation, she insisted, already knowing the answer. When Eduardo said no, she sighed dramatically. I'll see what I can do, she murmured, as if doing him the greatest favor in the world. Eduardo was led to a small table, hidden near the restrooms, away from the windows and the main traffic. It was the kind of place reserved for people they considered undesirable, but couldn't simply kick out. He sat in that uncomfortable chair and watched the hypocritical ballet unfolding around him. Waiters hurried solicitously to serve executives at their privileged tables with wide smiles and undivided attention.
Welcome.
But when they passed him, they barely looked up as if he were part
Just
of the
special,
decor.
please.
That's when she appeared. Carla was about 26 years old, with brown hair tied in a simple bun and eyes that held a deep sadness.
I'll just do the
Unlike
steak.
the other employees, who exuded that polite arrogance, she approached Eduardo's desk with a genuine smile. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Carla, and I'll be taking care of you today, she said in a soft voice that contrasted with the harshness of the others. There was something special about her, a humanity that seemed out of place in that artificial environment. Eduardo purposely ordered just a simple dish, the 15 real ones they served to the staff. He saw a shadow of surprise pass through her eyes, but there was no judgment. Of course, sir. Would you like something to drink? She asked with the same kindness she probably gave to wealthier customers. Eduardo just ordered water and she wrote everything down carefully.
What can I get for you today?
As if his order was as important as any other. While he waited, Eduardo watched Carla serving other tables. She treated each customer with the same respect, regardless of the bill they were going to pay.
Steak.
He noticed that her shoes were worn, her uniform impeccably clean but with small signs of wear. She was the picture of someone who worked hard to keep up appearances. When she brought the plate, Eduardo took the opportunity to start a conversation. You've worked here for a long time, she asked. 2 years, sir. I really need this job, she replied. And there was something in that sentence that touched Eduardo deeply. The restaurant manager, a man named Roberto Mendes, whom Eduardo only knew from reports, watched the conversation with a suspicious look. He approached the table with that fake smile Eduardo knew well. Is everything okay here? He asked, but his words were directed more at Eduardo than at checking the quality of the service.
What can I get for you today?
Just the
There
special,
was something
please.
threatening in his posture, as if he were marking his territory. Everything is perfect. Carla is being very attentive, Eduardo replied. and saw a
I'll just
flash
do
of
the steak.
irritation pass through Roberto's eyes. It was then that Eduardo witnessed a scene that would completely change the course of his life. Roberto called Carla to a discreet corner and began speaking to her in a low but visibly aggressive tone. Eduardo couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. Roberto was threatening Carla. He saw her face lose color, her hands tremble slightly, and she lowered her head in submission. When he returned to finish collecting Eduardo's dishes, he noticed tears in her eyes. The situation left Eduardo deeply uncomfortable. That young woman, who had treated him with dignity when everyone else had looked down on him, was clearly being bullied by her superior. Eduardo decided to prolong his stay in the restaurant,
Welcome.
ordering a coffee he didn't
What can I
want
get
just
for
to
you
keep
today?
watching.
Just the special, please.
It was clear that Roberto exerted some kind of abusive power over her, and Eduardo's conscience wouldn't allow him to simply walk away and pretend he hadn't seen anything. When Carla brought
I'll just do the
Eduardo's
steak.
coffee, he took the opportunity to ask a few seemingly casual questions. "Do you like working here?" he asked, carefully observing her reaction. She hesitated for a moment, looking around to make sure Roberto wasn't listening. "It's a good job, sir. It pays the bills," she answered diplomatically, but there was a deep sadness in her voice that contradicted her words. During their brief conversation, Eduardo discovered that Carla was supporting the family alone after her father became unemployed. Her mother, Isabel, worked as a cleaner but earned very little. Carla had dropped out of her teaching degree in her third year to work full-time and help with household expenses. Her dreams of becoming a teacher were put
Welcome.
away in a drawer,
What can I get for you
replaced
today?
by the cruel
Just the
need to
special,
survive. My 7-year-old daughter, Laura, always asks me when I'm going to go back to school, Carla said with a melancholic smile. "I always say one day,
I'll just do the
but
steak.
sometimes even I don't believe it anymore." Her transparency touched Eduardo deeply. Here was a woman who had sacrificed her dreams for her family, working in a hostile environment, being humiliated daily, yet still maintained her dignity and kindness. It was then that Roberto approached again, this time visibly irritated. "Carla, you're taking too long at this table. We have other customers waiting," he said in a voice loud enough to embarrass Eduardo. It was an obvious intimidation tactic. The young woman quickly apologized and walked away, but not before Eduardo saw the fear written on her face. Eduardo decided to pay the bill and leave, but something inside him couldn't accept the situation. Over the years of building his
Welcome.
business empire,
What can I get
he
for
had
you
learned
today?
to recognize
Just the
predators.
special, please.
Roberto had all the characteristics of a man who abused his power to exploit vulnerable employees. Carla was clearly one of the victims. Eduardo
I'll
left,
just do the steak.
a tip of 100 rays, much more than the dish cost, and saw the genuine surprise in her eyes when she found the money. In the following days, Eduardo couldn't get Carla out of his head. He sent his assistant, Paulo, to discreetly investigate the restaurant situation. What they discovered was worse than Eduardo imagined. Roberto had a history of bullying young female employees. He created situations of dependency, threatened to fire anyone who didn't submit to his wishes, and maintained an atmosphere of psychological terror in the workplace. They also discovered that Carla was being particularly targeted because she had witnessed Roberto taking bribes from suppliers. He was literally stealing from the company,
Welcome.
overcharging for purchases
What can
and
I get for
pocketing
you
the
today?
difference.
Just the special,
To ensure
please.
her silence, Roberto constantly blackmailed her with the threat of dismissal. "If you open your mouth, not only will you be fired, but you will also be sued for slander,"
I'll just do the steak.
he had told her, according to reports from other employees. The situation became more unbearable for Eduardo every day. He had the power to resolve this with a simple phone call, but he wanted to do it the right way. Carla deserved more than just justice. She deserved recognition for her strength and character. Eduardo decided to return to the restaurant, this time prepared to act. A week later, Eduardo returned to Sabor Paulista wearing the same simple outfit. He asked to sit at the same table and waited for Carla to serve him. When she approached, he saw that she looked even more dejected. "Hello again," she said with a forced smile. "You're back." During the service, Eduardo
Welcome.
took the opportunity
What
to
can I
ask
get for
more
you
direct
today?
questions.
Just the special, please.
"You seem worried. Is everything okay?" he asked. It was then that Carla did something that completely surprised Eduardo. She looked around, checked that Roberto wasn't nearby, and leaned in slightly to whisper, "Sir, I don't know why I'm saying this to you, but I really need to talk to someone." Her words came out in a rush, like water from a dam that had finally burst. "My boss is making me go through very difficult situations. He constantly threatens me, and I'm afraid of losing my job." Eduardo listened attentively as she vented about the daily humiliations, about how Roberto made her work twice as hard while other employees were idle, about how he deducted any mistake from her salary. "Yesterday he made me clean the men's bathroom because he said I was too slow in serving," she said with tears in her eyes. "I don't have a college degree, but he treats me like I'm worthless." What impressed Eduardo most at that moment was that even while reporting all those injustices, Carla didn't show any anger or bitterness. She just wanted to work with dignity and be respected. "I don't ask for much from life," she said. "I just want to raise my daughter with dignity and who knows, maybe one day go back to school." At that moment, Eduardo made a decision that would change not only her life, but his as well. You know, sometimes we meet people who remind us why it's worth believing in humanity. Carla was one of those people for Eduardo. If this story is touching your heart as much as it touched his, leave a comment telling me what you think. Do you know someone like Carla? Someone who, even when going through difficulties, maintains kindness in their heart? Tell me. Your stories always inspire me to continue sharing these real experiences. And if you want to follow more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Each subscription motivates me to continue searching for these human pearls around the world. Eduardo paid the bill and left the restaurant with a heavy heart, but with a very clear plan in mind. The next morning, he put on his best Italian suit, a silk tie that cost more than many people's monthly salary, and got into his armored BMW. He was no longer the simple man in cheap clothes. Eduardo was the CEO of Santos Digital, owner of a billion-dollar fortune, and more importantly, owner of the restaurant chain where Carla worked. Eduardo arrived at Sabor Paulista around 10 in the morning when things were calmer. The same receptionist who had treated him with disdain the previous week now rushed to greet him with exaggerated smiles. "Mr. Santos, what an honor to welcome you," she stammered, clearly nervous. The transformation in her behavior would be comical if it weren't so revealing about human nature. "I want to speak to manager Roberto Mendez immediately," Eduardo said in a firm voice. In a matter of minutes, Roberto appeared in a cold sweat, trying to hide his nervousness. "Mr. Santos, what a surprise. If we had known you were coming." He began to chatter, but Eduardo interrupted him with a gesture. "We need to talk in your office now." Once in the office, Eduardo closed the door and stood in front of Roberto. The manager tried to maintain his composure, but it was clear he was terrified. "I want you to explain to me some irregularities we discovered in this establishment's financial reports." Eduardo began, pulling out a folder his assistant had prepared. He saw the blood drain from Roberto's face when he showed him the evidence of bribes and overbilling. "Mr. Santos, I can explain," Roberto stammered. But Eduardo continued speaking. "Besides, I have reports of systematic moral harassment against employees. You have abused your position to intimidate people who depend on this job to survive." Roberto's expression went from fear to utter despair. "That is a very serious accusation." He tried to defend himself. "It's not an accusation, Roberto. These are documented facts," Eduardo replied, placing more papers on the table. "We have testimonies, recordings, financial evidence. You not only stole from the company, but also psychologically tortured innocent people." Roberto tried to argue, to make excuses, but Eduardo had already heard enough. It was then that Eduardo asked for Carla to be called. When she entered the room and saw him, her expression was one of total shock. She immediately recognized the simple man who had attended to her with such affection. "Carla," said Eduardo softly, "I want you to know that everything you told me is being taken very seriously." She looked alternately at Eduardo and Roberto, trying to understand what was happening. "Sir," she began in a shaky voice, "I don't understand." It was then that Eduardo introduced himself properly. My name is Eduardo Santos, and I am the owner of this restaurant chain. Last week, I came here in disguise to get to know our employees better. You were the only person who treated me with dignity and respect. Tears began to stream down Carla's face as she understood the situation. You are, she murmured in disbelief. Yes, it's me. And I want you to know that your honesty and kindness have not gone unnoticed. Roberto was petrified, realizing that his world was falling apart. Eduardo turned to Roberto with a stern expression. You are fired for cause. The authorities have already been notified about the financial crimes, and the labor issues will be resolved in court. Roberto tried to beg, to promise that he would change, but there was no turning back. Take your personal belongings and leave. Security will accompany you. After Roberto was escorted out, Eduardo turned his attention to Carla, who was still in shock. Now let's talk about your future, he said, sitting down next to her. You impressed me not only with the way you treated me, but with your strength in the face of adversity. People like you are rare. I'm creating a new position in our company, Director of Customer Experience and Employee Well-Being, Eduardo announced. You'll be responsible for ensuring that no employee goes through what you went through. You'll also implement educational support programs for employees who want to go back to school. Carla's eyes filled with tears of joy. The salary will be 15,000 reais per month, with all benefits. Eduardo continued. In addition, the company will pay for your education college in full, so you can fulfill your dream of becoming a teacher. And we will have a special scholarship for your daughter, Laura. Carla couldn't stop crying. Mr. Santo, I don't know how to thank you, she sobbed. You don't need to thank me. You deserve this and much more. Your integrity in a world full of falsehood is a rare gift, Eduardo replied sincerely. 6 months later, Carla had completely transformed the company's culture. She implemented psychological support programs, secure reporting channels, educational programs, and much more. She graduated in education and today, in addition to her executive duties, also teaches in underprivileged schools in her spare time. This story teaches us that sometimes the most special people are hidden in the simplest places. Carla showed Eduardo that kindness and integrity are virtues that no amount of money can buy, and that when we recognize and value these qualities, we create a virtuous circle that benefits all of society. Dear people, if you've made it this far, it's because, like Eduardo, you believe there are still good people in this world. I really want to hear from you. Have you ever been through a similar situation? Do you know someone who deserved special recognition? Tell your stories in the comments. Each story moves me and gives me strength to carry on. And if you want more real stories like this, please subscribe to our channel. Also, suggest topics you'd like me to address. You are a fundamental part of this journey to discover the best in humanity. Until the next story.
It's
See you.